All right, so in this video, we want to analyze chapters 6 through 10 of Brave New World and kind of talk about some of the aspects that are going on beyond the plot point. I mean, we will be talking a little bit about plot as we go here, but you are expected to have already read this and to kind of know what's happening in it. So we kind of want to look and kind of miss a few of the places of plot to more focus on the analysis or the ideas that are behind it and kind of what the interior story that Huxley is trying to do here. So chapters 6 through 10, we're going to see a lot of movement in between the relationship between Lenina and Bernard, more in the frontal chapters of those. And then, of course, we're introduced to a variety of other new characters. But first, in chapter 6, we really see that there's this connection between Lenina and Bernard and kind of what that is. And Huxley allows us as readers to watch it grow, but also deteriorate as well. Lenina is fascinated, yet also repelled by the oddity of Bernard's behavior, which is very interesting because if you think about the way that she's conditioned, it seems as if she's sort of attracted to him in a very non-conditioned way, maybe wanting what is supposedly told to her that's not good for her, if that makes sense. She's incapable of understanding his desire to be alone. She can't really talk to him well, and she also doesn't understand why he refuses to take Soma sometimes. His actions over the channel where he takes in the sort of helicopter and glides in and just stops it and turns off the radio kind of allows him to have this sense of silence for a moment. She can't handle it. It scares her because it's against her view of life, and also against sort of the idea of that idea of thinking, the idea of realization and coming to terms with reality. It goes against her ideas of what Soma does and how Soma defines happiness and reality for her. So as usual, she then will think that Bernard just doesn't find her attractive. She's drawn to him, but she thinks that he doesn't find her attractive. And this is how she defines herself in conjunction to how others view her, which isn't a conditioned way. After all, remember the community's idea of stability and one for all and everybody's in one, that sense of oneness. And yet that is actually creating a interior dialogue about the way she views herself. So we have to wonder who's going to change whom here, and how much of Bernard's rebelliousness is actually just sort of a cover to his own lack of self-confidence as well. The author Huxley does a really good job, I think, of drawing the two as a foil in this chapter. Now, the scene in the director's office is a foreshadowing that perhaps all is not perfect in this perfect world. Bernard likes to think he has rid himself of his hypnopathic conditioning, but the director's frankness bothers him. He actually is bothered by the director being truthful and blunt, and then so the director's story about his experience at the reservation sort of belies the calm, unruffled exterior he displays with the students in the first two chapters, and he gets mad at himself that he allows himself to sort of think back to that time, especially in front of Bernard, who he doesn't like at all. It also allows us as readers to recognize that he still thinks about this woman that he left there, as we will see through the rest of these chapters. Now, with Lenina at the reservation resort area, Bernard becomes officious to himself again. He is warning her about the primitive accommodations. And it's almost as if he's saying to her, yeah, I can do this, but I'm not sure if you can. And once again, he's kind of ousting and exaggerating his idea of himself to her. But what's interesting is that as they get there, he thinks of nothing else but calling Helmholtz Watson to ask him to go turn the tap off. And Lenina escapes her boredom and lack of understanding in her typical fashion. She goes and takes Soma. But Bernard seems to only focus on this very trivial thing back home when he should honestly be absorbed with this reservation that he's at. This is like his dream come true, and here he is thinking about whether or not he turned off water. Um, it's interesting because it helps us recognize that he actually wants to use this trip as a way to feed his ego, as a way to make himself look better when he returns home. Now, in the scene where he had been warned by the director about possibly being exiled, that really began to sow this idea of hatred. But yet there was the foreshadowing that lets us know that there's something going on here at the reservation. And so Bernard is beginning to be able to sow this idea of revenge together, and it becomes a part of the basis for his actions later against the director. He's going to use John and Linda. What's interesting is that he doesn't take any of the blame himself. Bernard is constantly issuing and putting blames on other people. It's never his fault, which is just another example of him turning his deep-seated feelings of rejection and inadequacy on someone else. He then binges on Soma and sinks into sleep, totally oblivious to the nature that he professes to seek around him. Lord Byron was one of the major romantic poets, portrayed himself as sort of this grand hero who is buffeted by the constraints of his society, and he creates his own sense of martyrdom. And this is Bernard's grandiose view of himself. But Bernard is not, and he can't be, the romantic Byronic hero that he imagines himself to be. So there are also a lot of vivid descriptions of the setting, both man-made and natural, and the savages that inhabit Malpais. The description of the sacrificial ceremony, the dance, is deliberately long and involved to fill the reader's mind and senses to this feel like we are watching the spectacle along with Bernard and Lenina. Huxley is also very obsessed with stench and filth, and this is interwoven into the ceremony. This literary color is one of the hallmarks of Huxley's writing. He likes to juxtapose the natural stark beauty of the southwestern United States with the primitive conditions of the Pueblo. So there's also this whole little characterization of Lenina where she cannot stand looking at the old man that is there and the wrinkles that he has. And it's interesting because this is something that is so involved in our contemporary society, this sort of attribution to not want to feel like we have aged, this constant obsession with youth, and definitely something that has played out from what Huxley has written to the modern time period. People are doing anything they can to look younger, not be wrinkled, to have a sense of youth maintained. After all, it's youth in our society that is rewarded. It's youth that is plastered on our magazines and in our advertisements. It's youth that is watched on TV more so than age and maturity. Now, John's sudden appearance and his strange speech surprises and excites Bernard. As he questions this strange blonde creature, he realizes that here is his means to get revenge on the director. Now, he must complete the circle and also meet the mom. The 25 years of agony and shame that come tumbling from Linda reveal that New World contraception is not perfect and that abortion is totally acceptable. Huxley again uses his obsession with stench when Linda's odor reminds Lenina of the blood surrogate used for embryos. Lenina gets sort of put into a trance. The heartbeat rhythm of the drums just puts her into this real idea of what the solidarity service was like. And it shows that the New World has recognized the need to sort of tap into the deepest primitive human emotions, but they dress it up in sort of a New World veneer. The symbols of the Indian dance are a strange sort of combination of pagan and Christian, very similar. Is the New World that has the sign of the T to combine religion with technology. The whipping of the boy is very similar to the scourging of Jesus before the crucifixion. The three women then remove his unconscious body, just as three women came to prepare the body of Jesus. In chapter 8, John's memories of times in his life when he made the scapegoat for the hate against his mother and was shunned by his tribe also stir similar feelings of alienation in Bernard. One difference is that John has been true innocent victim, while Bernard is really a victim in his own feelings of inadequacy. The two of them exist as outsiders in their respective societies, and Bernard perceives this as sort of a bond between them and uses it to manipulate John. John also doesn't see the disgust that Lenina has for Linda or Bernard's shudder at his scar. He has been Linda's protector and defender even though she's mistreated and neglected him and has often been in a drunken stupor. He immediately includes her when Bernard offers her to take him to London. In fact, escaping without her doesn't even cross his mind. So this shows that something natural is really going on in that play, this sort of conditioning, this desire for acceptance from the paternal, from the parent, is really an ingrained need that because he was born from his mother, there is this consistent relationship no matter how she treats him. And that's something that Huxley's trying to bring and make us think about as we look at family ties and non-family ties in the New World. Is messy okay? Is this a good thing? And it's interesting because there's this sense that it's a weakness in John, but yet perhaps it's really one of his greatest strengths. John also references Miranda from Shakespeare's The Tempest here. Miranda has been stranded on the island, remember, for 12 years with only her exiled and bitter father Prospero and his deformed slave Caliban. Prospero uses magic to shipwreck the persecutors and plans to punish them. And so Miranda sees new people coming onto land. She remarks, "Oh, wonder how many goodly creatures are there here, how beauteous mankind is. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it." Shakespeare, of course, uses brave to mean handsome and noble, not courageous. Just as Miranda has no experience with other people and their deceitfulness, so John also believes the new world, or the other place, will be this sort of perfect world that Linda has described, where he will finally escape the hurt and prejudice of the reservation. His adoration becomes apparent for his adoration for Lenina becomes apparent in chapter 9. Remember, he thinks Bernard is left with him. He thinks Lenina is left with him without him, and he goes and he throws a rock and he sees the green suitcase, and then he goes in and he sees Lenina in sort of a soma stupor. And so he has this real sort of obsessive connection because she represents everything in this new world society that he thinks he desires. And so his adoration for her is very apparent in this chapter. He's been beaten, neglected, and ostracized. His life has been one of dirt, disease, and aging. And his one love was married to somebody else. So Lenina is his fantasy come to life. It's this fantasy that he has created from the plays of Shakespeare. And when John thinks of Linda with Poppy, the words of Hamlet come in, but when he's looking at Lenina, he thinks of the words from Romeo and Juliet. He sees her as representing all the purity of the world. Very, very strong use of dramatic irony there from Huxley. So just as Miranda in The Tempest is too naive and the unworldly to see the true nature of her visitors, John adores what he thinks Lenina must also be. Chapter 10, as they come back, the director calls the New World the hive of industry. And the director's metaphor is actually more true than he realizes. After all social insects exist in a strictly regulated society. Each ant, bee, or termite living out its life while dutifully performing its job, as predestined from the moment the queen lays its egg in its cell. Each knowing its place. So the anomalies that are created or the anomalies that happen are destroyed because it's a threat to the existence of the whole. Here the director creates this idea because he is going to try to of course, suggests that Bernard is a threat. So Bernard enters. He's puffed up with his own importance, but it fades under the director's gaze. And the director's accusation of Bernard is designed to bring Bernard public humiliation and ensure that everyone else witnesses what happens. And then instead, Bernard ends up, I don't think it's Bernard that really humiliates it, but he allows the situation to humiliate the director by bringing in the entrance of Linda and John. Linda's confrontation of Tomakin and her flinging of the words, I had a baby and I was its mother, caused complete silence in the room. This paternalistic, chauvinistic attitude exists in the New World for John's my father causes a derisive laughter instead of a shocked silence. These are the smuttiest words in the society being told. It's like an extremely crude scene for everybody watching. And yet for us, we see that it's actually the demise of the director. His world has crumbled in just a few minutes. It's also a touch of irony that the director meets Linda in the fertilizing room, the same room where she worked when they met, and since it was his fertilization of her that caused the whole situation. This is, of course, the total reversal of fortune for the director, who was presented in chapters 1 and 2 as a man who was completely in control of his own destiny and just a perfect product of his society. In a matter of minutes, his life becomes a matter of scorn. And that's really where we end chapter 10, and that sort of brings us to the ideas that we see from chapters 6 through 10. This real sort of development is at the height for Bernard, but soon Bernard, of course, will have to follow as well.